Right? I can say a few things about my experience as a member of the International Advisory Council for Auroville, whose term expired a few months ago. And having witnessed at very close range everything that happened in the last 5 years now, and 4 years of our term, I have to say, and I'm sorry to say, it has been a major disappointment. Major disappointment because we were frequently interacting with the governing board, which had a similar term to ours, 4 years. And first of all, we saw that there was absolutely no sincere desire to even understand all of it. So a lot of cut and dried opinions, basically derogatory to Auroville, were expressed again and again. First of all, by the Secretary, Jayanti Ravi, who decided that Auroville had stagnated for 50 years, had not achieved anything, even though she would showcase Auroville's achievements to visiting VIPs, the very same achievements that she was condemning otherwise. But leaving her alone, the governing board members could have had at least a sincere attempt to meet the community and discuss and understand. There was not one meeting with the community in 4 years of their term. Not one open house. Yes, the chairman did come one day to Unity Pavilion and delivered a long speech. He didn't take any questions, and the speech was extremely denigrating of Aurovillians and Auroville achievements, even though he was basically in complete ignorance of all. So this very close-minded attitude was a major problem. And we tried, at least 4 out of 5 members tried, it fluctuated a bit this way, that way, to say that first of all you should work with the Residents' Assembly, because that's what the Auroville Foundation Act says, and forget about legalities and technicalities. That's the whole spirit of Auroville. It's about collaboration, it's about working together, it's about trying to resolve issues together. God knows that Auroville has met a lot of issues in its 55 or 57-year journey, but at least it's only by communicating and discussing that they can be tackled. There was no such willingness, there was no such desire, there was no such attempt. So when you come as a government-appointed body and you imagine that you can figure out everything without interacting with this community, and that simply bringing in the government machinery, the bureaucracy, the CPWD to construct Auroville is the most ridiculous thing we could think of. Imagine Mother being told that a government department is going to build up your city. What would she have said? It's totally absurd. Not to speak, of course, of the massive destruction of the environment, most of which was needless. Not to speak of sidelining. Of course, we as IAC, International Advisory Council, were totally sidelined. We were never heard. If we were heard, it was only for a few minutes at the end of the meetings. And I cannot recall a single of the pieces of advice that we gave that was discussed extensively in a meeting, let alone acted upon. So it was obvious soon enough that we were just a dummy body. And that's what actually the secretary said quite openly, that it's the governing board which rules Auroville and full stop, and that's all. So the residents don't matter, the IAC doesn't matter. What matters is purely that it becomes now a government project, which was never Mother's intention and will. She would not have minded if the government had helped, and she was actually asking for the government to help, which is what happened in the initial decades. But for the government to take the whole project under its wing and to steer it is a huge boost and it's bound to fail. That's what we try to explain. Government cannot even effectively run even a university. There is not one university in India which can shine on the international scene. Some are good, some are decent. None of them is exceptional because, for the reasons we know. Anyway, that's a separate discussion. How can the government possibly manage run successfully a project like Auroville? And it became purely a question of buildings and roads and real estate. And this is, of course, not what it should have been. What we were telling, and I remember telling the governing board chairman several times in the initial meetings, is that so far, governing boards have been protectors of Auroville, guides, and friends. This is what they've tried to do. They've tried to give advice, of course, and yes, many decisions were taken together with the IAC, together with the residents, and that's what made things progress to some extent. We can always point to flaws. Auroville is not blameless, no doubt. There've always been, people pulling back in the wrong directions or with narrow ideas and so on. But on the whole, for example, I remember once when the governor was saying again, repeating the same propaganda that Auroville has not achieved anything, I said, sir, that there's been no unity in Auroville, that Aurovillians are totally disunited. So I said, sir, look at the Matre Mandir. No doubt, we know that those who built the Matre Mandir, those who gave perfected the plans and so on, were disunited. There was a lot of disunity, but look at what happened in the end. Do you have a Matre Mandir or not? And he said, oh, but the Matre Mandir is a different thing altogether. Okay, fine, but it happened, right? So that is, in fact, what the spirit should have been. And when they were shown the process and the result of the dream weaving experiment, which we made a point to bring to their attention. And of course, they knew because they had also met the dream weaving team leaders and so on. We said, look, this is actually a counter-example to what you are saying. It shows that the community can work together. These are not just experts, not just urban planners. There are a few, all of whom had been sidelined, of course, because we know that the secretary made it a point to sideline all of Auroville's best experts. But at least they had in front of them a whole big group representative of a fair, sizable proportion of Auroville. And, they could have worked with them if they had the slightest goodwill and desire to build Auroville in the spirit of Auroville, spirit of harmony and collaboration and so on, which Mother never stopped, highlighting during the last years of physical life. They would have given a full chance. Instead of that, I remember a slightly contemptuous remark in a joint meeting. Basically, the dream weaving team was told, yes, very nice, go ahead, continue. But it was absolutely clear that none of the results would be considered. Even the fairly wonderful plans that they made, we saw them there about the very different concept of a crown road, which is an integrated concept, which had, this is all very innovative, very creative. And all the paths to innovation, creativity, and really looking for what Mother wanted, the researchers from within and without. All this was blocked again and again. So therefore we reached an impasse where the only way we had was to write letters, and God knows we wrote many letters to the different ministries, and we protested when the blackmail was used to threaten visas for foreign residents of Auroville. We protested again also about the land exchanges, because we said that these are shady deals, and we produced evidence and facts and figures. And, I can openly say that the only reaction we got when this was discussed in a meeting is a remark by the chairman, which I noted down on the spot, word for word. And he said the IAC, International Advisory Council, should not be too curious about these matters. But that's a certain language which we can understand, especially after we had given strong evidence and documents and a long statement, and there was no discussion. So what this points to is ultimately a perfect recipe for failure. I would almost prefer that Auroville should be closed. If that's what the government wants, close it down and declares that it has been a failure, but who will be responsible for this failure? Auroville is not a failure. Auroville has not stagnated. Auroville has had a huge pool of amazing talent across many, many fields, which I think is something very uncommon in the world today. And all this should have been, exploited instead of coming and sending JCPs in the middle of the night to demolish a youth center and some stupid actions of this sort. So it's a recipe for failure because, as Dr. Karanse once wrote, you cannot build Auroville without the Aurovillians. I still believe it is not too late. We're hoping that a new governing board will come, new International Advisory Council, new secretary, why not? And we're hoping that this will come with a different spirit, because I do believe that somewhere the government, at least enough members in the government, and we had this Parliamentary Standing Committee for Education visiting last year, right? About 31 members, if I remember well, 16 of them from the ruling party. And it gave a pretty, in very, very polite and respectful language, it gave a pretty damning indictment of what the current administration had done. And it gave very positive recommendations, which we also had given, many of them, not always identical, but similar, and which many others, like Dr. Karan Singh and others, had also been giving. So it's not as if the solutions are not known. We have also these 2 reports by the Auroville Global Fellowship, which consists of, as you know, many, many international well-wishers and sometimes former residents of Auroville, very objective study. And there is it gives a way forward. So it's not as if the solutions are not known. But for that to happen, the spirit of the whole attempt has to change. And some genuine goodwill has to come. And some genuine engagement with all of it. And of course, a certain number of things have to stop. For example, the kind of, I mentioned the blackmail on visas. We could mention so many other issues. 250 people denied their meager monthly maintenance for no valid reason at all, mostly those who work in farms and forests, all issues we flagged at some point or the other. So this, of course, has to stop. The spirit of this atmosphere of what we call coercion and intimidation and threats, sometimes even physical threats, we've known the cases, that has to stop. And it's not too late to turn a leaf and have a genuine body that will understand its spirit as a trustee of all of it. That's what the previous governing boards were. Whatever they achieved or did not achieve is not the question here. The question here, what is the real role, if you look at things a little at a deeper level? It's that the government is a trustee. Of course, it owns technically the land which have been 100% bought from private, non-governmental sources. It owns that land. It's the trustee of this land, which it never contributed to. So it has to understand that's what we try to say, this role of protector, guide, and trustee. If that spirit is understood, all the rest can be resolved. But you need people with genuine goodwill. We need also people with a certain caliber. because the Auroville Foundation Act very rightly says that members of the governing board should be people familiar with, I don't recall the exact words, but people very well aware of Auroville and people who have contributed to Auroville. That did not apply to any of the governing boards, right? So we need people who fulfill those conditions and who come with the right spirit. And then the government should trust the process, should trust that, yes, there will be difficulties. You cannot have 3,500 people living together without difficulties. But where do you have even government institutions without such similar challenges, right? It's very easy to take random government institutions and to show, stories of internal politics and backbiting and God knows what else, sometimes corruption and what else. So we live in an imperfect world, but Auroville is trying to show a way forward. And if we lose track of this whole spirit, then there's no purpose behind it. So I still keep hope that at some point there will be a realization that the path which was chosen, by whom exactly, I don't know, and for what purpose exactly, we don't know. We can guess perhaps, but it's just a guess. This path is a sure road to failure. And all of it has an international responsibility. We've said again and again, it's only in a country like India that Auroville could be hosted. It's true. Well, there have been international communities elsewhere, but it's true that this is the best place given this whole millennial culture, which is very much in harmony with Auroville's objectives. It's true that this is the best place, and it's true that Auroville should ever be grateful to India for having permitted this experiment. But at the same time, the government of India should take pride in Auroville at an international level, saying, see, we have promoted this experiment, we have enabled it, we have facilitated, and we welcome, as Mother said, people of goodwill from all over the world who want to come and help, but of course with whatever conditions we want to set down. So this is the whole story in brief, and we must keep hope that this extremely valuable dream, which was partly turned into a reality, we call it a dream, but to some extent it became a reality, not the full extent of what Mother would have wanted, of course. But she said it may take 100 years, it may take 200 years, but Auroville will be. So we're not yet at 100 years, I believe. There's still time, but we must turn a new leaf and change the direction.
Michel, I wanted to ask you something because, the IAC, they work very strongly against the product land exchanges.
Yeah.
But in fact, in these land exchanges, Auroville received so many more acres than what it gained. So why did the IAC call these exchanges corrupting in any way?
First of all, it didn't receive that many more acres. In fact, for the entire statement that we made, it was just a ratio of 1.4 to 1. So maybe 40% more. I cannot vouchsafe, I would have to go back to the figures, but it was not many, many times more. It was just a little more. And that was the argument of the administration. How can you protest when the lands that we have received within the city area are more than what we give? But the problem is the value involved, because in the city area, the market value was about 1.2 to 1.5 crore per acre, whereas the land that they were giving away, many of them were located in prime market locations. For example, the Oro Orchard deal was so shameful, and this we flagged very strongly. Because there the value was 8 to 10 crores, the market value. And in fact, it was many, many more times that once you parcel out the land and start selling plots at 2 to 6,000 rupees per square foot. So therefore, when we did all the calculation and we Of course, we were told that the administration had to compulsorily register the lands at the guideline value. We challenged this. We said this is not true. Nothing prevents you from registering at a much higher value. Nothing. There's no such law in Tamil Nadu, no such rule in the registration. You are always welcome, in fact, to register at a higher value because then the government will readjust its guideline values. So this was, first of all, an untruth. Number two, when we did the maths and we applied the real market value to, because that's what matters in the end. It's the guideline value is not the real value of the land. The real value is the market value. When we applied it, we found that there was a discrepancy for that limited. This was, I'm talking about 2024. Since then, there have been more. And we have now to update our earlier statements, perhaps. We found that there was a difference of 240 crores between the totality of the market values of the land given away to very disreputable people in addition, known land sharks, and the lands which were acquired in the city area. So therefore there was, and then we applied some corrective factors, being very, very conservative. We wanted to be absolutely beyond criticism. And being very conservative, we brought down this difference of 240 crores to about 190 to 200 crores, which was the loss incurred by Auroville on these land deals. And our argument was twofold. We said, first of all, we agree that land exchange is desirable. Some consolidation of the city and even sometimes possibly the green belt can be desirable. Fine. But we said again and again, under an earlier secretary, Mr. Chunkat, there had been a certain protocol which we submitted for the transparency of the deals. A certain protocols had been spelled out. Not only that, the community had been consulted, which is what never happened now. And a certain list of lands which were, let us say, not of very critical importance or immediate importance to Auroville, not much in use, were listed that could be best candidates for future land exchanges. All this was brushed aside. And we never got a proper answer. We were never told that, your argument is wrong, your facts and figures are wrong. We could see that the secretary was very unhappy with us, but she had no answer. So therefore, this has been our reply. And what I've followed from the more recent land exchanges is even worse, because the market value of the lands being given away, considered for being given away like Jaima, like Serenity and so on, is even higher than what was given previously. And the lands which are supposed to be acquired in exchange are much less critical to Auroville. They are not actually right in the center of the city, except maybe for one or two. Some of them are actually small, tiny plots scattered in the green belt of no importance, no immediate urgency for Auroville. Why are these plots acquired, and why are very valuable lands on the coast or on highways being considered as candidates to be given away without any regard for the residents there, without any regard for those who created those assets? Again, I repeat, totally out of public funds, entirely out of private funds, private donations from Aurovillians, from Indian well-wishers, from well-wishers abroad. Over all these decades, government never invested 1 rupee in these lands. And then you have now the administration coming and says, this belongs to me, and I'm going to give away, and I don't care for the residents. I'm summarizing a little crudely, but that's exactly what happens. So this is, to me, immoral, unethical, and it will definitely cause a kind of deep injury, lasting injury, because those lands might never be recoverable. So I believe many groups have tried to raise awareness about this and to raise technical objections also, because there are many technical aspects which are shady. We will see where this goes eventually, but this is definitely one of the major questionable actions of the administration since July 2021, along with visa blackmail and cancellation of maintenances and interference basically in so many aspects, financial, all aspects which ultimately end up killing the freedom that Aurovillians had. So they said, you've misused your freedom, you've misappropriated a lot of funds, as if the current administration is not doing just that. And when we said, please give us evidence, there are black sheep quite likely. Okay, you cannot not have black sheep in such an experiment like Auroville. If there are very genuine cases, please take action. We told the governing body. But let us see the evidence. You are accusing people without providing any evidence and without giving them a right to answer. That is totally contrary to natural justice. These were our arguments.
You see, I have a question for you. Because here you have the value of, what we would consider the mother's land.
Yes.
Which is to be, we don't have it and we have to get it to build the city. And then we have these, we're putting guideline value, market value, and all these different kinds of values. But don't you think that the value of completing the vision of the mother is much higher than any guideline value or market value or something? So why do you say...
True, but mother never said that she regarded, let us say, the land within the so-called city area as so much more valuable than, say, Oro Orchard or Annapurna Farm. She never said that. I'm not aware. She, on the contrary, she insisted that these lands on the outskirts of Auroville were of immense value because these were the lands that were going to feed Auroville. So, and she put so much of her force in places like Oro Orchard and so on. I remember that once one early Aurovillian, asked mother, it's very difficult to do agriculture in Oro Orchard. Should we not use chemical, pesticides and fertilizers to make things easier? And she said, we are not here to repeat the errors of the past. So she was absolutely focused on these lands. These lands were equally important. The whole thing is important. The green belt is important, and we've lost many opportunities, I'm afraid, to increase the green belt area, but that's another story. So everything is important. And also the fact that the administration told us we cannot possibly buy land. I do not believe this is true. I believe it is still possible to buy land. There could be ways, there could be negotiations to be held, there could be even intermediaries, whatever. But it's not as if. And, again, we were told that Auroville has not done anything in this field, consolidated the city area, etc., for all these decades. But when I interviewed the previous secretary of the foundation, I will not give his name, he told me that during his term, 350 acres of land in the city and greenbelt area were either acquired or exchanged, got through exchange. 350, not a negligible amount. So it's not as if it was not attempted or done before. It was, but it was done in a fairly transparent way. So yes, we have to be very careful which land we give away. They should be really land of the most minor importance. And I do think that, mother was very flexible also. She was never rigid. So I do think that she would have agreed to some exchanges for certain critical portions of. But when you see that the land acquired now are small, meaningless little plots in areas which don't matter, then you have a right to question. But ultimately, you have a point, and we also flagged it to when we said that, for Auroville, land is sacred. It has a spiritual meaning before everything else, before being farms, before being residences. It's the land that will permit this experiment to flourish. And how do we know, what Oro Orchard could have been after 20 years or 50 years? But now it is maimed, it is crippled, right? How do we know what Annapurna could become in 20, 50 years? And now 100 acres is given away for free to an IIT which has already plenty of land elsewhere and doesn't even need such a campus. So we have issues.
Thank you very much.